Becca here. Welcome back to my channel, and I am here today to show you my personal way to gather fabric. So as I said, this is my personal favorite way. I like to do this on patterns even if it is not written in the instructions. And now this method will not work for every single type of pattern. It does work for a lot of them, but ones where you're having to complete the whole bodice before you can gather, or if your skirt pieces are not equal to your bodice. So if you have like 3 skirt pieces to gather instead of just the 2 that match up to the front and back, you won't be able to do this method. But so then you will have to gather in the round. But when I can do this method, I love to do it this way. I just think it gives me the most clean and nicest looking gathers. So let's get started. And okay, so I have my front and back bodice pieces here. I've sewn them at the shoulders as the instructions state, and oftentimes, just like the instructions for this pattern, it is written that you're supposed to sew this seam right here, but I am going to wait to do that for this gathering method. And this is just, I like it. It helps me get more even gathers, and I just find that they lay nicer. And yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold my bodice in half, and I'm just going to mark a halfway point. And you can mark it with, sorry, I have a lid in my mouth. You can mark it with a pin or some tailor's chalk, or however. I'm just using a washable marker because that's what I have, and it doesn't really matter because this is just a little, you can put a notch. So you should have 3 points on it, and I'm going to do the same thing on my back bodice pieces. And this is just so that when we are gathering to attach it, we can easily find where our skirt is evenly supposed to meet our bodice. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my skirt pieces and I'm going to do that same thing. So here's my skirt pieces, and sometimes depending on what size you're doing, you don't need to do quarters. You can get away with just doing a halfway point, or you might need to do like 8 points if you're doing a really big gathering skirt. It just kind of depends. And I mean, obviously, the more you do, the more even your gathers are going to turn out. So it's just kind of personal preference. I usually just do 2 or 4. That's the easiest way for me. And say, so once I have those all marked, what I'm going to do, so I'm going to set my bodice aside here for a second. I'm going to open my skirt pieces, and I'm going to head over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew 2 rows of gathering stitches, which, if you are not familiar with a gathering stitch, you set your machine to the longest stitch length, which on mine is a 4. It's typically a 4 or 5 length, and then a straight stitch. So you're just going to go, I like to do about 1/4 of an inch, and then like 5/8 of an inch or so, just all the way across on both skirt pieces on the top side. Alright, so I have put my gathering stitches in, and it's kind of hard to tell on here, but you can see that I have 2 rows of stitches up there at the top. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set aside 1 piece of my skirt. And so then what I like to do is I like to take my bodice here, and I prefer to use pins over clips when I am gathering. Let me get my colored pins so you can see, because pins do not shift. They are stuck in the fabric, where clips, sometimes you can pull the fabric through and it doesn't stay lined up, or it's kind of hard to get the gathers under the clip. So what I'm going to do here first is I'm going to take, so here's my center point. I'm going to find that point on my bodice, and these pattern pieces, the skirt front and back, are the same. So it doesn't matter which piece I use, but if not, make sure you check your pattern pieces so that you're attaching the right side of your skirt to the right side of your bodice. But so once I'm just going to pin my center point right now. So I did my stitching on the top side, the printed side of my fabric, which means my bobbin thread is on the back, and so you want to find your bobbin threads. So I'm going to come over here to the end, and I'm going to take both of those bobbin threads and pull them forward. So the threads on the printed side of the fabric, I'm just going to kind of push aside and out of the way, and then you just pull, and you got to kind of shift down. And I'm just going to pull this string only to the pin. So just going to kind of keep pulling. Until I get, right now I'm worried about getting my, this side right here. I want this to be the same length. So I got it there, so I'm going to put a pin in that. And then I'm going to adjust these to kind of even them out and make sure that my quarter point is matched up. So I got that. And so now I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side. I'm going to find my bobbin threads and just pull those. Alright, and so if you over gather a little bit where it's too short, that's fine. Just come over to your gather and just pull it out all the way to the end, and that'll lengthen that back up. So I got that even there, so I'm going to put that pin in, and then again I'm going to just even out my gathers and make sure I match up that quarter point again and put a pin in it. And then so I like to work on one side, either my front or back at once. I don't like to do them both at the same time. So what I'm going to do here next is I'm going to go over to my machine, and I'm going to feed this through. I'm going to keep the gathers on the top, and I'm going to baste this down at about 1/4 of an inch or so. But as I baste, I'm going to make sure that my gathers my raw edges are lined up and that my gathers are laying nice and flat. So like here you see it's kind of tucked in there. We want to make sure as it feeds through, you keep those gathers nice and flat and laying at their natural drape angle, I guess you could say, and that they stay nice and even. So I'm going to go do that. Alright, so I went ahead and also serged that seam when I was over there, just because I'm going to do it anyways. So what you can do now is you can kind of pull those basting stitches to stretch it out a little bit, and once you flip it over, you'll see you have these nice gathers in there, and like you can see mine, some of the gathering stitching is popping through a little bit, so at some point that's going to need to be pulled out, but we'll do that at the end. But so then we're going to do the exact same thing now on the other side of the bodice. So we're going to find the halfway point, pin, gather, and find our quarter points, and then we're going to baste that on and then serge it. Alright, so again, I basted that on and then serged it. The basting is just, it's not necessary, but it is, I think, crucial if you want your gathers to look really nice and stay even. So I'm popping those basting stitches, and then I'm going to flip it over, and you can just see how nicely these gathers lay. And so what we're going to do next is now, so how we skipped the step of that side seam. So what we're going to do now is we're going to flip these over, and you are going to now we are going to sew up that side seam. So I'm going to you want to make sure you match up your seams right here where your bodice and skirt meet. And I'm going to just pin that there. And then I'll start up here at the armpit and just go on my serger and sew all the way down to complete that skirt. And so what the instructions have you do is they have you, most of the time, will have you sew up your skirt pieces together and then gather it in the round, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but I just find it's hard, like I said, to make them even and to just when you're working in a circle, you can't see it as a whole. So this way, it's just nice and easy, and I just think it gives a much cleaner finish. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that up, and I'm going to do that on the other side as well. Alright, so once you sew up those side seams, you then can continue on to your pattern the rest of the way. So I just have to hem my sleeves and my hemline and then add my neckband. Your patterns will require different, but then I'm going to just turn it out and show you how nice that looks. You will need to, again, go through and rip out any of those gathering stitches that we put in that you can see. So I will go ahead and do that. I'm not gonna make you guys stay around and watch, but that's just your last step, and then you can finish your pattern as written. All right, so once you finished whatever the remaining steps of your pattern is and did your hem or whatever it may be, you are done, and then you can just sit back and look at how beautiful your gathers turned out. So this turned out beautifully. I love it. It looks so good. You could choose to top stitch your seam down if you would like on dresses and things like that. I don't typically do it because there's really no issue with the seams slipping or anything because of the weight of the skirt. And the one thing I did forget to mention in the tutorial, if you are adding a sleeve to your pattern, you do the same steps as I showed you, but you would attach your sleeve to your bodice in the shoulder, the arm side area, but you would not sew up the side seam. So that would all be done as one step. You would sew up your side seam and then your bodice and then down your skirt. So that is the one thing I did forget to add on there, but that's just a minor simple task. So I hope this video was helpful in helping you get more comfortable with gathering and finding maybe a different way to do it. What is written in the instruction isn't always the best way for each individual. So as I said, this is my favorite way to do it. And as I mentioned at the beginning and during the video, this is not going to work for every single pattern. So when you are starting a pattern with gathering, I like to just kind of read through the instructions real quick and see which method I'm going to use. And if I can use this method, then that is always my go-to. And if you thought this video was helpful, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel for future videos, and make sure you follow me on Instagram @SewBex for more sewing related content. Bye, hope you have a wonderful day.